सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपात्तमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवं परमानन्दमाधवम्। So Narad Ji defines bhakti as an infinite love for Bhagavan for infinite period of time. What is the result of this bhakti? One becomes totally contented, peaceful, feels a sense of fulfillment, becomes immortal, revels in one's own self. What is the nature of this devotion? This devotion makes a person desireless. Normal worldly love fills the mind with desires. Divine love makes the mind free from all worldly desires. Divine love is of the nature of renunciation. Renunciation means what? Renunciation of all support systems, all worldly supports. It makes a person depend only and only on God for every need. This divine love is such that it makes a person give up all worldly pursuits. So he had seen the definition, Nirodharupatvat. So Ananyata and Udasinata, they are the characteristics of this devotion. So once a person has taken up this path as the supreme goal of life, then he has to come under the protection of the scriptures. He must do whatever the scriptures say, because the scriptures are meant to take a person to this supreme devotion. Now the question is, what are the characteristics of this devotion? When it wells up in the heart, how does that person express that devotion? So different acharyas have given different opinions. Vyasa Rishi said, this devotion expresses as a desire to do puja, to express one's love and devotion for God. Garga Rishi said, Katha Shravanam, there's a tremendous amount of interest, love for listening to the glories of Bhagavan. Shandilya Rishi said, fine, all these things are fine, but devotion is devotion only when there is reveling in the self. The joy has to come from the self alone. But then what is Naradji's opinion? What is the proof that devotion is there in the heart? What is the proof? The proof is a person then dedicates his entire life for God, and moreover, whenever there is forgetfulness of God, there is intense misery. Tat vismarane parama vyakulata. So this is the sign of devotion. What is the sign? The sign is how much we become miserable in the absence of God, in the forgetfulness of God. So yesterday we had discussed it. How much a person becomes miserable without God, that shows how much he loves God. In fact, the devotees don't even love the discussion of worldly things. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, if you see, I think once he was going along with Mathur Babu to some pilgrimage place. So on the way they had to stop at some house of some person. And this Mathur Babu and that owner of that house, they started discussing worldly matters. Worldly matters means what? Related to money, related to estate, where to invest, this, that. And Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, poor man, helpless he is because it is in somebody's house. He started loudly crying. He went a little aside and then started crying, Bhagavan, where have you brought me? All Kamini Kanchana discussion is happening here. He became miserable. So when the mind deviates from God, how much misery you feel, that shows your love is that intense. Even while watching TV, etc. also, if that program is something other than devotion, you become miserable. Even while watching TV, etc., movies, etc., how much misery you feel when your mind is away from spiritual path. That misery is actually the indication from Bhagavan, from within, that you are deviating, that you are wasting time. Come back. That Vyakulata is an indication from Bhagavan himself. Tad vismarane parama Vyakulata. Bharata in Ramayana tells Bhagavan that after 14 years, if you are late even for one day, you will not find me alive. That was the kind of devotion which all these great people had. Tad vismarane paramam vyakulata. So what is the example which Narad Rishi gives? The example which Narad Rishi gives is that of Gopikas. That love which Gopikas had for Krishna. Yesterday, as we have seen, whereas these Rishis were struggling to keep the mind in Bhagavan, Gopikas were struggling to keep the mind away from Bhagavan. That was the glory of these Gopikas. Now one may feel that no, this love is not pure love. Because this love towards a handsome young man called Krishna, it may be an illicit love, imperfect love, impure love. So then Narad Rishi says, no, this love is pure love, because Gopikas knew the greatness of Krishna. This Krishna was none other than the Supreme Self of all beings. This glory, that this Krishna is none other than the avatar of Bhagavan, this Mahatmya Jnanam Gopikas had. So therefore, this love cannot be called an impure love. If suppose this Mahatmya Jnanam was not there in Gopikas, then definitely this love is impure love. No doubt. Another reason why this love was pure love was because Nastyeva tasmin stat sukha sukhitvam. What is the proof of pure love? When the lover wants to give maximum happiness to the beloved, not bothering about one's own happiness, then that love is called pure love. So in pure love, the lover is not bothered about one's own happiness. Very many times the lover goes through intense worldly miseries, intense worldly losses. But then he is happy when he sees his beloved happy. If this thing is happening, then know for sure that that love is a pure love. Gopikas had this kind of love for Krishna. Now this is a beautiful thing which we should also keep in mind. What is the sign of pure love? Tasmin tat sukha sukhitvam. This is the kind of love which we should also have for God. What is the nature of this love? Is my beloved happy? Then only I am happy. So what is the question we devotees must ask to ourselves? If I perform this particular action, will it please the Lord? If it pleases the Lord, then only I will do it. The question asked is not, will it please me? All the actions which are vasana related, habits, tendencies, inclination, various kinds of vasanas we have, vasana related actions we always love. The question is not whether I love it or not. The question is whether Bhagavan loves it or not. So who is a true devotee? A devotee is a one who performs all action for the sake of Bhagavan. Tad arpita akhila acharata. He is asking this question to himself. What is the question? With this action, will my Bhagavan, will he be happy or not? Now see that, my Bhagavan. Bhagavan is not some Bhagavan. What does the devotee say? He is my Bhagavan. He has developed that relationship. And now he wants this relationship to grow. When will my relationship with Bhagavan grow? When I do what he says. When I become obedient in his eyes. When I do what he says, then my relationship with my Bhagavan grows. This is true in the world also, isn't it? Parents have general love for their children, but then they will have a special love for that child who obeys them, isn't it? When the child is obedient, listens to whatever the father and mother says, then the parents will have a special love for that child. General love is there for all children, but whichever child is obedient, special love is there. Sometimes we test our children also, isn't it? Especially when they are small babies. There's a small child and the child has 2 chocolates and the child's sister or brother is there nearby. So what does the mother say? Give 1 chocolate to your brother also. Now this child loves this chocolate. It doesn't want to part with it. But when the mother says, and when this child gives that chocolate to the other fellow, what happens to this mother? Mother feels so happy, isn't it? That child loved the chocolate. In spite of that, that child parted away with that chocolate. So then what will the mother do? She will bring another big packet of chocolates. That special love comes. These are all the little things through which we have to learn how to love Bhagavan and how to be a recipient of the love of Bhagavan. Through the world, let us learn how to love God. Through the worldly love, let us learn to master divine love. That is the purpose of creating this world. So just like parents' love becomes intense for the child who is obedient, in the same way, we also have a relationship with Bhagavan. So in this practice of devotion, how to develop this relationship with Bhagavan? Be obedient. Be obedient means what? Let me not ask what I love. Let me always think what Bhagavan loves. Now what is it which Bhagavan will love always? Bhagavan will always love the path of dharma, righteousness, goodness, virtues, compassion, love, forgiveness. This is what Bhagavan always loves. So if I want to receive that love from Bhagavan, what should I do? I should practice all this. This is called as Tasmin tat sukha sukhitvam. I am happy when my Bhagavan is happy. And when is my Bhagavan happy? When I do what he wants me to do. Tasmin tat sukha sukhitvam. I am ready to do anything what my Bhagavan wants me to do. So, tasmin tat sukha sukhitvam. So this is what we as devotees we must do. What makes Bhagwan happy, we should do whatever it may be, and whatever may the price we may have to pay for it. And that's what exactly we learned from Mahabharata also. Pandavas, they stuck to righteousness throughout their life. But even when Bhagwan asked them to deviate from righteousness, that also they did. That is the greatness of Pandavas. Yudhishthira was a man of truth. When Bhagwan said, tell a lie in the battlefield. Which is that episode? Ashwatthama is dead, you must tell. Who said? Bhagwan said. Now Yudhishthira thought for a moment. What is it? On one side Bhagwan is telling, tell a lie. On the other side Dharma Shastra is telling, don't tell a lie. Now which one should I obey, follow? Should I follow Dharma Shastra or should I follow Bhagavan? What did Yudhishthira do? If my Bhagavan is pleased by my telling a lie, I will tell a lie. See that? Because Bhagavan is an embodiment of Dharma. If Bhagavan is asking me to tell something, it cannot be adharma. The thing which I think to be dharma, there is all the possibility from the bigger picture, it might be adharma. Because my intellect is small. Who am I to decide what is dharma and adharma? But if Bhagavan has asked me to do something, I will do that. He did it. When Karna's chariot was stuck, he got down from the chariot. He was trying to lift the chariot, take out the chariot from that muck. Bhagavan said, Arjuna, chop his head off. Arjuna hesitated because it is adharma. You are not supposed to kill a warrior who is not fighting the war. So here is a warrior who was not fighting the war, and here is Bhagavan asking to kill him. What should you do? Dharma Shastra says don't kill him, but Bhagavan says kill him. What should you do? Arjuna did exactly what Bhagavan said. This is the sign of bhakti. Bhagavan, if this is what pleases you, I will do it. Whether it is dharma or adharma, I don't know. Right? So that is why throughout that Mahabharata war, you will find Pandavas doing all the adharmas actually. More than the Kauravas, it was Pandavas who were doing adharma. But nobody blamed Pandavas for doing adharma. Why? Bhagavan said it, therefore we did it. Drona was killed by adharma. Bhishmacharya was killed by adharma. Then Bhurishravas was killed by adharma. Jayadratha was killed by adharma. Duryodhana was killed by adharma. Karna was killed by adharma. Kauravas killed only one, Abhimanyu. Here it is 6. 6-1 is the scoreboard. But even then, we don't blame Pandavas. We only praise their righteousness in spite of doing all this because they did what Bhagavan said. This is the glory of devotees. They do everything to please Bhagavan. And look at Bhishmacharya. He revealed a secret of how to kill him to his own enemies. That's the glory of Bhishmacharya, another great devotee in Mahabharata. In fact, the entire Mahabharata is revolving around one person called Bhishma. If he had married, the whole Mahabharata would have been disappeared from the history. He didn't marry, and therefore the entire story was. So therefore one pillar around which the whole thing was built up is this Bhishma. See his greatness. I think on the 9th day or so, he fought such a brilliant battle that Pandavas were nowhere. Bhagavan himself had to jump out of the chariot to stop, to halt this man. Just remember, great-great-grandfather fighting this way in that age. Can you imagine the strength of this old man? Pandavas were trembling in fear. They thought if Bhishma fights this way, within 2 days the war will be over. That night, Bhagavan himself takes all the Pandavas there. In the night, they fall at the feet of Bhishma. It was all suggestion given by Bhagavan only. Ask Bhishma how to kill him. And then what did Bhishma do? Nobody knew the secret. Bhishma said, Bhagavan, if you want to kill me, I am ready. And he revealed the secret. This is the way to kill. Keep that Shikhandi in front and shoot arrows. In front of Shikhandi, I will not take my weapons. See the greatness of this devotee. He has given his life. Bhishma, why? Bhagavan wanted my life, I give my life. Bhagavan wanted me not to live. Fine. Let thy will be done. This is called Tasmin Tat Sukha Sukhitvam. Bhagavan, if this is what you want from me, I have no objection. I will just do what you want me to do. Tasmin Tat Sukha Sukhitvam. Continuing. Yes. So now comes the next topic. What is the next topic? Next topic is how this bhakti is greater than all the other paths. Whether it is karma, jnana or ashtanga yoga, whatever. That is the topic. Let us see verse number 25. Satu karma jnana yogebhyo api adhikatara. Next sutra also will chant. Sutra number 26. Falarupatvat. So what is being said? Sa, that bhakti, tu, indeed. Adhikatara is higher, is superior. This devotion is superior. Superior to what? Karma, jnana, yogebhyo api. Compared to karma or jnana or yoga. So when we say yoga here, which yoga? Ashtanga yoga. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. That Ashtanga yoga is called yoga here. So what is being said? This bhakti is superior to all the other paths. Mainly these are the three paths. Karma, jnana, yoga. Now this verse has to be taken very, very carefully. There is all the possibility we will misunderstand. This is the style adopted by the scriptures in general. What is the style? Whatever is the topic, praise that topic. So now this is which Shastra? It is a Bhakti Shastra. So what is the most important thing? Bhakti is most. So they will say Bhakti is the most important thing. Now if you take Jnana Shastra, what will they say? Jnana is the ultimate. Ahijnanena sadrisham pavitramiha vidyate. Jnana is the greatest. And they give logic, of course. Everyone has their own logic also. So what do these jnanis, jnana margis say? Jnana is the highest because all our suffering is because of ajnana. Ajnana means ignorance of the self. So if ignorance of the self is a problem, so what should be the solution? Knowledge of the self should be the solution. Therefore, knowledge alone is supreme. Who say that? The Jnana Shastras, the Upanishads, etc. They say. Now we are dealing with Bhakti Shastra. So what will Bhakti Shastra say? What are you talking? If you see Bhagavatam, there is a Bhagavata Mahatmyam. In that Mahatmyam, Bhakti is considered to be the mother. Jnana and Vairagya, knowledge and dispassion, they are considered to be the children. Jnana Vairagya is our children. Who is the mother? Bhakti is the mother. And who is Mukti? Mukti is Dasi. The servant maid of Bhakti is Mukti. No importance is given in Bhakti Shastra for Mukti at all. Mukti is given free. Bhakti is given importance. According to Bhakti Shastra, a person who is striving for Mukti is an inferior Bhakta because he is doing business. Bhagavan, I love you, you give back Mukti. Third rate, what you call bhakta is a bhakta who is striving for mukti. Who is a true bhakta? Who loves expecting nothing in return. Such a bhakta, if there is somebody like that, mukti just follows like a dasi. This is the philosophy of Bhakti Shastra. And it is true in its own place. So now we have to understand, because different scriptures are talking differently and different things are given importance. So for a person who really want to be impartial and know the truth, so we have to understand in that way. What is supreme, bhakti or jnana? So we have to understand, from the highest point, bhakti merges with jnana. Both are one and the same. So when they do this comparison, what does it mean? See, jnana has got inferior type and superior type. Similarly, bhakti also has an inferior type and superior type. So whenever in the Jnana Shastra they say Jnana is greater than Bhakti, we have to understand the superior Jnana is compared with the inferior Bhakti. When Bhakti Shastra says no, Bhakti is greater than Jnana, what we have to understand? The inferior Jnana is compared with the superior Bhakti. So first of all we have to understand what is this inferior Jnana and superior Jnana. Jnana, knowledge, happens at 3 levels. What are the 3 levels? Level number 1, Shravana Janita Jnanam. We gain knowledge. When do we gain knowledge? When we listen to the knowledge of the scriptures. When we gather the information from the scriptures. When we read the scriptures, we get information. This information is also knowledge. But this knowledge is considered to be inferior knowledge. Why inferior? Because it is only an intellectual knowledge, it is not experiential knowledge. So a person who has studied the scriptures, he will say, Aham Brahmasmi. Even though he will say Aham Brahmasmi, but has he experienced it? No. He can at the most say, the scriptures say so. I have not experienced. The Mahatmas say so. I have not experienced. So any unexperienced knowledge is inferior. It is only a gathered knowledge. It is a mere information. Unless the information has transformed the person, that knowledge cannot be really called knowledge. Right? So Shravana Janita Jnanam is always called as inferior knowledge. In this context, because we are going to discuss that now. After Shravana, what happens? Manana happens. You gain the knowledge. You gain the information. Then you reflect upon it. Churn within. Clear all the doubts. And slowly, the information which you have gathered becomes conviction in you. That churning is called Mananam. So Manana Janita Jnanam. A little higher. So after Mananam, after reflection, whatever knowledge you have gained, it becomes very clear, free from doubts, and you are convinced about this knowledge. But that also cannot be called a perfect knowledge. It is again at the intellect level only. Then we have the third stage, which is called as Nididhyasanam, where really you work on it. You really burn away your vasanas, your tendencies, your habits, and you come to a stage where you really experience whatever is said in the scriptures. If it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, you really feel it. So this is not a mere knowledge, it is your feeling. It is your experience. You feel it. It is not just you know it, you feel it. Till the knowledge has not come to this state of experience, that knowledge cannot be really called knowledge. Once this knowledge becomes an experience, then that knowledge is called superior knowledge. So therefore at the knowledge level we have different levels. So whenever in Bhakti Shastra they are criticizing knowledge, which knowledge are they criticizing? Not the superior knowledge. Because earlier also it is said, the Bhakti Shastra itself, how did they glorify a Bhakta? He revels in the self. We have seen. Atmarati, that term has come. What is it? Actually nothing but knowledge only. Abidance in the self. So superior knowledge and superior bhakti both are one and the same. So in the Bhakti Shastra, when they criticize jnana, which jnana are they criticizing? The Shravana Janita jnana. A person who has read so many books, he has gathered a lot of knowledge in the sense, information. Such a knowledge is being criticized. So what is being said here? Now let us come to this. This bhakti is higher than karma, jnana and yoga. Why is it so? Reason is given, phalarupatvat, because of the result. Results prove everything. What happens to a bhakta who is practicing bhakti? What is the result? What is the result when the heart is filled with devotion? Now please understand, a bhakta is the one who is practicing bhakti. Who is practicing bhakti means what? He is entertaining devotional thoughts. So what happens when the mind is filled with thoughts of devotion? Your heart becomes pure. Your heart becomes peaceful. You intuitively feel the presence of the Lord. There is contentment. There is fulfillment. This is what happens when the heart is filled with devotion. There is no delay at all. The moment that devotion occupies the heart, that heart becomes blossomed. And in such a pure heart, you will intuitively experience that supreme knowledge which is Aham Brahma Asmi. You very clearly know that this consciousness itself is Lord. It is the ultimate truth. So what is the phala? These are the phalam. Whatever we have seen earlier. But what is the phala of jnana? Remember, we are talking of inferior jnana. What is the result of jnana? You collect lot of information. You by heart so many verses from so many scriptures. Are you happy? The final bottom line is this. Are you happy? There is all the possibility you can become miserable. You know all the scriptures, but still you are miserable. You may be miserable because you are not able to reproduce the by-hearted mantras. You can be miserable when you are trying to argue, and this is a very common tendency found in people who have studied little scriptures here and there. What will they do? The tendency to argue, the tendency to show off one's knowledge. Suddenly that pride also comes. I know, I have studied, I know everything. That I know everything generally comes for a jnani, this inferior jnani. Ego grows. You gather more and more jnanam. What grows? Your ego is supposed to dissolve. You are supposed to know that this ego is illusory. But a person who merely gathers knowledge from the scripture, from just mere information, very many times such a person is hated by their own family members. This fellow is ready to preach. Anything happens, immediately preaching begins. And when a person preaches without practicing, it is the most ugly scene. And this ugliness, the family members know. So they are waiting. This person is all the time preaching. And when this person gets irritated, angry, etc., suddenly they say, oh, what is the use? You go to all satsang and all, but still the same thing. No change at all. That is when it pains you the most. This is what happens to a dry jnani. Their knowledge is called dry knowledge. What do you mean dry knowledge? Knowledge is there, but that personality transformation has not happened. That sweetness in the personality which the scriptures promise, that is not there. Jnana is there, but it's a dry jnana. The ego has grown. No improvement in his behavior, in his speech, in the way in which he carries about. Nobody loves him. Rather, people are scared of their Vedanta. Because once this fellow starts, he will not stop. People try to avoid them. And unfortunately, Vedanta has got bad name because of such people. This is what jnana does. So which is superior? Bhakti or jnana? If you compare this inferior jnana with that superior bhakti, definitely bhakti is superior. Problem with jnana is there is a possibility of ego rising up, and this person becomes argumentative. He tries to show off his knowledge, and at the same time, though externally he appears to be knowledgeable, internally he is hollow, empty. These are all the dangers of jnana. So therefore, bhakti is superior to such a jnana. The next one is karma. Now which karma are we talking of? We are not talking of the great karma yoga, because wherever there is karma yoga, there has to be bhakti. What is karma yoga? Performing all actions as a worship of the Lord. Performing action in order to please the Lord. So the moment all these term comes, you have included bhakti in it. We are not talking of that karma here. What kind of karma are we talking of? We are talking of selfless action without devotion. We are not talking of selfish action. Selfish action has no place at all in spirituality. We are talking of selfless action. What do you mean selfless action? There are so many people who do lot of charity. There is some amount of selflessness. Somebody is suffering in the society. I have lot of money, so therefore I give. So Annadanam, Vastradanam, all these come under that, but without devotion. Because we are comparing karma with bhakti, so bhakti should not be mixed with karma. So selfless service without devotion. Is it superior? It is inferior. Why? Again here also, if it is not backed by the right understanding, if it is not backed by devotion, then you will find that a person, as he becomes charitable, his ego also rises. The same trouble happens here also. I have given so much. That ego comes up. Very many times we find in the society, some people, they join this selfless organization and they do lot of service also. It is not that they don't do, they do lot of service, and after so many years of service they resign with a bitterness. And what do they say? So much I have done to this organization. Very many times I have spent money from my own pocket. I have done so much, but still not a word of thanks, not an appreciation, not some form of recognition. No. They have always taken. They have not given anything. Now what kind of selfless service is this? Very many times we find in the society people complaining like this. Sometimes they do this to their near and dear ones. Their own brother, sister, etc. And finally they say, I have done so much to them. They take great pride in whatever they have given, but at the same time they expect something in return, and when that expectation is not met, they become miserable. So what is the end result? Selfless service you have done, but the end result is misery only. Remember, this doesn't happen with a karma yogi. This doesn't happen with a karma yogi because he is performing action, he is giving, very clearly knowing that Bhagavan, whatever I am giving, it is yours. I am not the giver, you are the giver. A karma yogi does it for purification of mind. Very well aware that whatever I am giving, it all belongs to Bhagavan. So there is absolutely no ego, no pride. Even when there is no thanks coming from the receiver, he is not at all, he doesn't care for it. The very performance of action itself gives him satisfaction. We are not talking of that karma here. We are talking of selfless karma without devotion. Now which is superior? Bhakti or karma? Definitely bhakti is superior. Karma, jnana, the third one is yoga. Actually speaking, Ashtanga Yoga contains all the steps. Yama, Niyama. In that Yama, Niyama itself, Ishvara Pranidhana is there, which is nothing but devotion for God. But when we are talking of yoga here, we are mainly talking of these two things. Because in society, yoga means only these two. What are they? Yogasana, Pranayama. Some asana you do, some pranayama do, then they will say, that person is doing yoga. Okay. In the society, this is the meaning they have when they say yoga. Actually speaking, yoga means all. In fact, real meaning of yoga is anything which unites you to God is yoga. So your prayer is also yoga. Everything is yoga. But in the society, when we say yoga, mainly we talk of these two things. If a person is doing yogasana, pranayama, then we say he is doing yoga. That yoga is being spoken of here. So when you do that without devotion for God, so whenever we say jnana karma yoga in this context, we have to understand minus devotion. Because devotion comes on the other side. So what happens to such a person? He is doing yogasana, he is doing pranayama, he is doing wonderfully well, but there is no devotion. Then what happens? Well, his health will be wonderful. Because there is a cause-effect relationship. You keep your body healthy. Yes, yoga, pranayama, etc. makes your body healthy. Fine. What about the mind? Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Mind will be helplessly quiet. Because when your breathing is slow and steady, mind has to become quiet. We don't deny that. But that quietude will be a dry quietude. Just like jnana is dry, yogi's shanti is also dry. There is no devotion. Mind is helplessly quiet. This quietude is born out of suppression. You can suppress your mind through yogic techniques. It's nothing but breathing. Slow breathing will make the mind quiet. The mind doesn't want to be quiet, but it is helpless. It will become quiet. 10 minutes you breathe slowly, your mind will become quiet. But is it a healthy quietude? No. Is it a natural quietude? No. It is only a temporary quietude. As long as your breathing is slow, mind is helpless. Vayurodhanat liyate manah jalapakshivat rodha sadhanam. Just like the bird caught up in the net. Bird cannot fly. Bird wants to fly, but it cannot fly. So in the same way, pranayama is like the net, bird is like the mind. It is not a healthy peace. But what about the peace experienced by a bhakta? That is supreme peace. A peace which is coming directly from God. A peace which is free from all kinds of worries and anxieties. A peace which doesn't depend upon your breathing. A peace which depends upon the right understanding. That I am in the lap of Bhagwan, everything is safe, everything is fine. This understanding gives a peace. When you experience Bhagwan in your heart, it gives peace. So that is called a healthy peace. That's a real peace. Whereas this peace, which a yogi experiences without any devotion, just because of his breath control. Of course, for a person who is filled with worries and anxieties, this peace appears to be a great thing, great achievement. A person who has never experienced peace, a person who has always experienced agitation and disturbance and stress and strain and worry and all those things. Especially nowadays, that is what they do. Youngsters are full of stress, worry, etc. So therefore, first 10 minutes, they just make them relax. How? Ask them to breathe slowly, steadily. In 10 minutes, they are all peaceful. And that peace goes away. That's a different matter. But, yes, the person who has never experienced peace, this appears to be a great achievement. But the peace which bhakti gives is still far, far higher. Again, the problem with yogi is there is all the possibility that he might grow egoistic. Because there are so many complicated asanas, flexing the body. And a person who is capable of flexing more tends to develop a greater ego that, see, my body is more perfect. He compares. It's very easy to compare the grosser things, like flexing the body. It's very easy. People can see. So people can take pride in yoga and pranayama. These are all the dangers of other paths. We are not criticizing any path, please understand. We are only discussing the inferior level of these paths. Each yoga has got its own superior level. We are not discussing that. So compared to bhakti, jnana and yoga, compared to jnana, karma and yoga, bhakti is greater. Phalaswarupatvat, phalarupatvat, because of the very result. The moment bhakti comes in your heart, that heart becomes, it is like a blossomed flower. Those who have experienced bhakti, they know. When that heart is filled with bhakti, what a peace. It is inexplicable. So this is the reason why bhakti is superior. Now Naradji gives another reason why bhakti is superior. The next verse, 27. Ishwarasya api abhimanadveshetvat dainypriyatvat. So another reason given by Naradji. Why bhakti is superior? What is the reason? Naradji says, even Bhagavan loves this path. Oh, Ishwarasya api. How can you say that? That Bhagavan loves this path the most. Abhimana dveshitvat. What is the nature of Bhagavan? Bhagavan just cannot stand one thing. And what is it? Abhimana. He hates Abhimana. Bhagavan can stand every other negativity in you, vice in you. But one thing which he cannot stand is Abhimana, the ego. Dainya priyatvacha. And Bhagavan loves one thing. What does he love? Dainya. Deena bhava. Bhagavan, I am a nobody. I am nothing. That meekness, that humility, Bhagavan loves it. Ego, Bhagavan hates it. Humility, Bhagavan loves it. And now what is the nature of bhakti? In the beginning itself you are practicing this. Unlike other paths. In the beginning itself, what is the bhakta trained to practice? He says, Bhagavan, dasoham. Bhagavan, I am nothing. I know nothing. I have nothing. I can do nothing. This is how the bhaktas are trained. In the beginning itself, Bhagavan, I have no pride over anything because nothing belongs to me. Whatever I have belongs to you. I am nothing, you are everything. Now this attitude, Bhagavan loves it very much. And it is true. Whereas in jnana, it is not like that. Jnana, it is inquiry. Who am I? It starts with who am I. Now whether you are fit to inquire, who am I, that's not questioned. In the beginning they say, sadhana chatushtaya sampatti has to be there, after that start. Very many times we fail in the path of jnana only because qualification is not sufficiently gathered. What is the qualification? This is the qualification. Become a nobody, then you are qualified for spirituality. Become humble and simple, then you are qualified for spirituality. With your ego, with your confidence in your intelligence, if you attempt jnana, you will be an absolute failure. Only pride will increase, only ego will increase. This is the mistake which very many people do in the path of jnana. With their ego, with the confidence in their intelligence, with the confidence in their discriminating power, with their confidence in their education, they try to understand the scriptures. You can't. Just not possible. Whereas in bhakti, that danger is not there at all. In the beginning itself, what do you say? Bhagavan, soham may be true, but I don't want that. Dasoham. What does a jnani do? Soham. He's trying to prove that I am Brahman. Bhakta says, Bhagavan, I am a nobody. I am a dasoham. And you will find that the moment that humility comes, the mind is at peace. What is the end result of all spirituality? Peace. This person through dasoham gets it instantly. You try in your own case. You try at the seat of meditation. Try to say, I am Brahman. On the other side, try to say, Bhagavan, I am a nobody. I am an absolute nobody. Which gives you peace? Tell me. I am Brahman gives you peace or I am nobody gives you peace. You will find the moment you become humble and simple and weep in the presence of God. Bhagavan, when you confess, saying that lot of papam I have done, I am the greatest papi in the world. Bhagavan, please shower your grace. Your grace alone is my only hope. You do this for 2-3 minutes, the mind is peaceful. And the peaceful mind is a proof that Bhagavan's grace has been showered on you. Peace of mind is the proof. In the path of bhakti, you do this. You say Dasoham. And when you say Dasoham from the depth of your heart, you experience Soham by His grace. What did I say? Dasoham is self-effort. Soham is grace. Soham is not self-effort. That is given by Bhagavan to you. You say, Bhagavan, I am a nobody, I am Dasa, I am a nobody. Bhagavan, through His grace, blesses you and makes you feel that you are none other than me. We are one. This is His blessing, this is His grace. So Bhakta is a person who remains at His feet and Bhagavan lifts him and puts him next to him. What does this foolish jnani do? They directly go and sit beside Bhagavan. It is like the Shishya. Guru taught, Aham Brahmasmi Tattvamasi. Shishya was at his feet. Then Shishya said, Oh Guru, you are also Brahman, I am also Brahman. Then what is the difference? Then why should I prostrate to you? I should sit next to you. He came and sat next to Guru. Right. Guru will kick him out, isn't it? Foolish Shishyas do that when they listen to this jnana. They are logically right. I am Brahman, you are Brahman. Why should I prostrate to you then? A Bhakta will never even think of doing it. Bhakta say, no. Soham may be ultimate truth, but let me practice Dasoham. So in that practice of Dasoham, when he becomes a nobody, because that's what humility does. You become a nobody. Then what remains? When you become a nobody, what remains is only God. If God alone remains, what will you experience? You experience God. You don't experience God with your self-effort. You experience the state of Godhood through His grace. What was your self-effort? In becoming a nobody. Not in becoming Brahman. So bhakti is a path which Bhagavan loves. In Tulsi Raman you will find Hanumanji, after burning Lanka etc., he comes back and Bhagavan is looking at Hanumanji. Hanuman, what have you done? I can't even think. So much you have done. Bhagavan says, Hanuman, I am so much indebted to you because so much you have done for me. I am not even able to stand in front of you. I am not even able to look at you. Bhagavan's eyes were filled with tears out of gratitude for Hanuman. What is it that I can do for you? Because whatever I do, it will be less compared to what you have done for me. And when Bhagavan entered into that state, Hanumanji just fell at the feet of Bhagavan and said, Trahimam, save me, Bhagavan. Because you are praising me so much, my ego is waiting to boost, to bloat. He just fell at the feet of Bhagavan, held on to the feet of Bhagavan. Bhagavan, don't praise me. Whatever I have done, it is because of your grace, not because of my ability. Whatever ability I had, it is only because of your grace. Not even 1% credit Hanumanji took for himself. That was the greatness of Hanumanji. He did everything. But not even 1% credit he took. He said everything only because of Bhagavan's grace. He held on to the feet. Bhagavan is trying to lift him. He won't come up. It is such a touching scene in Tulsi Ramayana. Bhagavan is trying to lift him. He is not living. And finally Bhagavan lifts him and hugs him. Hugs Hanumanji. This hugging is called Soham. What was Hanumanji's effort? Dasoham. Bhagavan, I am at your feet. Bhagavan lifts him and hugs him. Similarly, Vibhishana falls at the feet of Bhagavan. Bhagavan, I am the Mahapapi, born in an Asura Vamsha. I don't know what devotion is. All negativities are there in full measure. But I know that you are an ocean of compassion. So therefore I have come to you. And then he falls flat at the feet of Bhagavan. Bhagavan immediately got up from his seat, ran to him, lifted him, and made him sit next to him. And immediately made him Lankesha, the king of Lanka. See that? Devotees are always trying to be at the feet of Bhagavan. It is Bhagavan who lives the devotee. This has to be understood. Devotee's effort is to remain at the feet of Bhagavan, to become a nobody, to become humble, simple, meek. A devotee should be insignificant in his own eyes. To the extent I am insignificant in my own eyes, to that extent I become significant in his eyes. This is the glory of bhakti. This is the glory of bhakti. So bhakta takes no credit for anything. And the greatness of bhakti is, normally the comparison given is, a jnani, for him the comparison, the nyaya given is Markata Nyaya. Whereas for a bhakta, it is Marjarat Nyaya. Meaning what? As far as a jnani is concerned, the responsibility to protect him falls upon himself. Like the monkey, baby monkey. Have you seen baby monkeys? Baby monkey has to hold on to mother monkey. This mother monkey will jump from one branch to another, tree to another. What should the baby do? Baby monkey has to hold on to mother. If it leaves, finished. Very many times we find that also. Small little monkeys fallen down, dead. Why? Baby's responsibility is to hold on to the mother. What about cat? Marjara means cat. The mother holds on to the kitten, the baby cat. Now, which hold will be stronger? Mother holding the baby or baby holding the mother? In bhakti, bhakta says, Bhagavan, you only have to protect me. You only have to lift me. And Bhagavan says, yes, I will lift. Tesham aham samudharta mrityu samsara sagara. I will lift them. They don't have to do anything. So the entire responsibility of lifting the bhakta from the samsara sagara falls on Bhagavan's head. Responsibility belongs to Bhagavan. Because as far as the bhakta is concerned, he has totally surrendered. You can't blame him if something goes wrong. Entire responsibility taken by Bhagavan. This is the glory of bhakti. So indeed, bhakti is greater than all the other paths. In fact, the glory of bhakti is even that jnana comes only when the heart is filled with bhakti. Very clearly Bhagavan says in Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. Those people who worship me, chant my name, chant my glories, they love me, I give them knowledge. So who comes first? Bhakti comes or knowledge comes? Bhakti comes. That's why bhakti is the mother. Jnana is the child. First cultivate bhakti, then jnana comes. Bhagavan gives you. So bhakti is indeed superior. Continuing. Now the question is, what is the means of cultivating devotion? What is the means? So now there are different opinions. Let us see different opinion. Verse number 28. Tasyaha jnanameva sadhanam iti eke. Yes. What is the sadhanam? What is the means of developing devotion? To develop devotion, what should I do? So eke, some acharyas are of this opinion. What is the opinion? Jnanameva sadhanam. The means is knowledge alone. Now what does it mean? What it means is, you cannot love unless you know. So what comes first? Knowledge comes first. So some Acharya says it is a knowledge which gives devotion. And from one angle it is true. Because how can you love God without knowing God? You can't love a stranger, can you? No. You must know about him, and slowly, slowly that love grows. As your knowledge increases, your love for God also increases. As your knowledge about God increases, your love for God also increases. In the beginning, you don't see God, you don't hear God, you have never attended satsang, so there is all the possibility. Everyone starts by saying, there is no God. There is no God. Rational people, logical people, scientists, materialists, they start by saying there is nothing called God. It's all hallucination, superstition. That's the first step. But slowly, 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 as one evolves, he goes to the second step. What is the second step? I believe in God, though I don't love him. I believe that there is some force, some power, which is taking care of this world. Of course, I have no love for him, that's okay, but I believe in a power. This is the second stage. Then slowly, slowly he starts experimenting with this power. You are in deep trouble. They say God is there. Let me try. Bhagavan, save me, if at all you are there. And you find results. You are in deep trouble and your prayer works. You go to the next stage. Little love starts. Love comes up as a bud. So such a devotee considers Bhagavan as a wish fulfiller. My wish, there is somebody to fulfill. So therefore, Bhagavan becomes a wish fulfiller. At that time, this love appears as a bud. But still he is not able to completely love God, because in the world so many things are seen. Corruption is there, disease is there, suffering is there. So somewhere at the back of the mind he thinks, Bhagavan must be cruel only. Because so many pain, suffering, everything is his. If there is some Bhagavan, then he should solve all these problems. So therefore he is not wholeheartedly, he is not able to love God. But slowly, slowly his knowledge about God increases. Then he understands, no, this suffering is necessary in life. Just like the wound in the hand of the child, the mother has to cut open the wound, clear the pus, everything. In the process the child may cry. In the process the pain may be given to the child. But mother does everything for the good of the child. But she is helpless. She has to give that pain. In the same way, Bhagavan is giving pain to all these beings. Not because he is cruel-hearted, but because of his compassion. Even in the pain, even in the suffering, he sees the compassion of the Lord. So his bhakti, his love evolves to the next state. What is the next state? Bhagavan is not mere wish fulfiller. He is our well-wisher. His love gets upgraded. And finally, he comes to know, that Bhagavan is me, my own true self. My supreme self is that Bhagavan. Then what happens to this love? Highest love. Parama prema amrita swarupacha. So see how the love towards God increases step by step, stage by stage. First no love, first no belief at all in existence of God. Then slowly, 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 as my knowledge about God increases, my love also increases. And finally, when the knowledge becomes perfect, love also becomes perfect. So therefore, this statement is right. What? Tasyaha jnanameva sadhanam. The more you know God, more you are able to love God. Therefore, try to know God. This is the opinion of some acharyas. What about other acharyas? Next one, verse number 29. Anyonya ashrayatvam iti anye. Iti anye, others. What is their opinion? Anyonya ashrayatvam. You just cannot say only knowledge. Because earlier it was said jnanameva sadhanam. You cannot say only knowledge. There is anyonya ashrayatvam, meaning there is a mutual dependence. What does it mean? You have to know God, fine, but then you have to practice devotional disciplines also. Meaning what? First you know, then you practice. That practice makes you further know. With that further knowledge, you again practice. That practice again increases your knowledge. So each one supporting the other, and finally you reach. This is also very logical. Suppose you want to learn cooking. Only studying this, that book, it won't help. What you have to do? Know how to cook a particular dish, then go and try it. You may not be successful in the beginning, you will mess up the whole thing, but in the process you learn something, knowledge comes. Again you try it, again something new learn, isn't it? So you know, then you do, you learn more, then you do better, then when you do better, you learn something more, and fine. This is called as Anyonya Ashrayatva. Knowing and practicing. Anyonya Ashrayatva. If you want to learn swimming, what do? Only knowing will not do. You may study all the theory, you have to jump into water. Only then the finer details which cannot be written down in the paper, only then you will know the knack of remaining on the top of the water, floating. There are certain things which are not there in the book, but you will know only when you do. So therefore that is called as Anyonya Ashrayatvam. Iti Anye, others say that. That is also fine. See, all these are right. From therefore their own standpoint, they are all right. Now, some others. There is another opinion also. What is that other opinion? Verse number 30. Swayam phalarupata iti Brahma Kumaraha. Brahma Kumar. Who is this Brahma Kumar? Not Brahma Kumaris and all. Brahma Kumar means the sons of Brahmaji. Who are the sons of Brahmaji? Sanaka Adi Rishis. What is their opinion? Knowledge is not needed. Swayam phalarupata. You just keep practicing it, knowledge will come. Devotion will come. You don't need any knowledge. So where is the emphasis? Doing, not knowing. You see the difference? Practice, practice and practice. Automatically you will start knowing. You don't need to know who is God. Not necessary. Keep on doing japa. Be sincere in your sadhana. It is God's responsibility to reveal who He is. It is His responsibility. This is called as Swayam Phalarupata. It will give results by itself. So where is the emphasis? Doing. And that is also right. Sharada Mata used to say, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's wife, Sharada Mata, she used to say, you want to know the glory of God? Chant Bhagwan's name 15,000 times every day for 1 year, and then you see. You don't have to know anything. Just chant. When you are sincere in your sadhana, dedicating yourself, you may not know anything about God, doesn't matter. Do it sincerely. You will find the result. Swayam Phalarupata. You don't have to know anything. It is God's responsibility to reveal His glories to you. This is what Naradji also appreciates. See, whichever the opinion comes last, that is Naradji's opinion. Right? Naradji says, this is right. No qualification is necessary. No. Your effort. You take one step, Bhagavan will take 100 steps. But you take your first step. Doing is important. More of this we will see tomorrow. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.